Hello, dear students. I'm Dr. Vijay Kumar, Department of Philosophy, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee College, University of Delhi. Students, as you all already have done something about the ethics, the theories and application. There you have already learned about the ethics, what are its different theories, and what are the definition of the ethics. But today, as our topic of discussion is about environmental ethics, and the environmental ethics, as you might be just noticing that this word itself use the terms ethics. So therefore I will start about the ethics. So it will give you a recap about the ethics. Then we will discuss about what is environmental ethics and the concerned issues. So let us start with the ethics. What is ethics? If we just look at the etymologically of the word ethics, this term came from the Greek word ethos, which means basically custom, habit, character or disposition of people. So basically we can simply say that ethics is the science of human conduct. So in that way, ethics tell us about what is good for individual and society. So sometime therefore it is also known as that science of value. So basically the main purpose of ethics is just to evaluate human conduct, and it also says by the process itself that what is the good human being, what action are the good action, what action are the bad action. So therefore ethics tell us about what is good for individual and society. So it talk about the good also, that what we mean by the good. So and obviously this definition of the good and the classification of the good varies thinkers to thinker, or you can say just one moral philosopher to other moral philosopher. Again, as we can just have the sense from the earlier just statement that ethics is all about to know that what is good for individual and society. Ethics attempts to answer the questions like what is good life, how to act well and rightly, etc. So basically you can just have a sense now. Ethics try to answer the question what is good life, what action is good action. So in that way ethics address our moral considerations. So in that way we also call that this ethics that moral philosophy. So ethics is also known as moral philosophy. Now again we can say that in ethics we, or the moral philosopher, try to study of the values and guidelines by which we live. It means that it also provide us that what sort of values are acceptable values and what kind of values just give a guidance to our action. So therefore ethics is basically related to the human action. At the same time it also talked about the justification of these values and guidelines. It means on the first hand ethics provide us values and guidelines, but at the same time ethics also talk about the justification of these values and guidelines. What are the justification? For example, if suppose we say that when we observe some society, a moral philosopher says that the basic value of the society is truth speaking, for example. Now question is that on what ground we say that truth speaking is a value. So in that way ethics is also discuss or provide to give the justification of the said values and guidelines. So therefore finally we can conclude by saying that ethics is the philosophical thinking about morality, moral problems, and moral judgments. Now, if we just look at this ethics, there are three most important and main approaches to address the ethical issues. So, a moral philosopher basically just address three sort of moral situation, moral issues from three different approaches. One of that approach is meta ethics. When we say that meta ethics, basically, as the word itself again indicate, meta means beyond, and ethics, it means it is beyond the ethics. So in meta ethics, moral philosopher try to know the meaning of moral judgment, the nature of moral judgment, and at the same time it also talked about the argument given in favor of moral judgment. So in a sense we can say meta ethics is all about to know the meaning, nature of the moral judgment. Like for example, when someone says that speaking truth is good, cheating is bad, so what it means? What is the meaning of this statement? What is the nature of this statement? Is this statement simply an expression of liking and disliking, or the human emotions, or it has the meaning something else? So basically meta ethics also, or you can say that in a nutshell, meta ethics just talk about the just the meaning of the moral statement as well as nature of the statement, and based upon this meaning and nature, moral philosopher in meta ethics also discuss about the nature of the argument given in support or against the moral judgment or the moral concept. So therefore meta ethics is also known as analytical ethics. It analyzes the nature, meaning of moral judgment. Secondly, there is another second approach which is known as normative ethics. Within this normative ethics, we talk about the norms, and normative ethics, simply we can say, try to answer the question what is right action and what is wrong action. And based upon the nature of this question, basically there are different theories, like there are deontological theories, there are consequentialist theories, there is virtue theories. These are basically different approach about the addressing the question what is good life, what is the meaning of living well and good life. And finally, that it also provide us by addressing, or the process of addressing these issues, this also provide us the standard, the moral, fundamental moral principles to answer the question what is right action and what is wrong action. When we come to the third approach is known as applied ethics. In applied ethics, we discuss about the day-to-day practical moral issues, moral situations. If we look at this whole division of moral philosophy, like meta ethics, normative ethics, and applied ethics, then this meta ethics and applied ethics are comparatively new branches of ethics. And in that also, applied ethics is just newly emerged stream of discussion. It emerged, you can say simply, you can simply say that applied ethics emerged just in 1970s, or you can say after the mid of 1950s or the mid of the 20th century. So applied ethics, as I told you, we discuss the practical application of moral principles, norms, and standard. So in applied ethics, we can say that normative theories are applied to specific moral issues like human nature, relationship, animal rights, abortion, euthanasia, etc. As you just reading these issues like human nature, relationship, animal rights, abortion, etc., these are very practical issues in which we humans entangled in, at least in contemporary time, in we can say time to time. So basically we try to understand that how to find out or how to resolve these kind of practical issues which emerged after the 19th centuries. So in 20th century, as the society changed, the new problem emerged. Earlier, there was not such problem like means a moral, just you can say human nature relationship, or at least you can say that no moral philosopher discuss about that what is the animal right, whether animals have the rights, or in what way we should approach the animals when we discuss about the ethics. And obviously, when I am saying that no thinker approach these issues, my simple point is that it was not discussed in much more philosophical way, though mentioning are there. People in the antiquity, we have the examples of discussing issues, but as a full-fledged philosophical problems, moral philosophical problems, these issues emerged in 20th centuries as society changed, as the new issues emerged. And obviously we can easily find out, or we can just look that these new kind of problems were not able to resolve simply by the older kind of traditional ethical theories. So therefore, when we come to this applied ethics, it is the application of moral principles. It is the application of ethical principles. Though in applied ethics there are again many divisions, like there is a care approach, then there is a case-based approach, but that is obviously out of our scope. I will not discuss here all those approach. But now, when this applied ethics is defined in the sense that in applied ethics, moral philosopher try to apply normative ethics on practical issues, then this kind of definition obviously comes into the target of various moral philosophers. And after that, after the criticism, after the just thoroughly deliberation, intellectuals, moral philosopher just went for the different approaches to the applied ethics, as just I mentioned about. There is a care approach, there is a case approach, etc. So, but now, as we know that our focus of the discussion today is just environmental ethics, so we will just come to environmental ethics via this route of applied ethics. The environmental ethics itself is the, simply you can say, or one of the most area of discussion of applied ethics. Though there are many other areas, like there are many areas of bioethics, there are business ethics, there are professional ethics, there are computer ethics, there are many ethics. Sometimes all the hyphen ethics comes under this head applied ethics. But among them, the one of the most important area of discussion of applied ethics is environmental ethics. So, what is environmental ethics? That is the question for us now. If we try to understand the notion of environmental ethics, or what is environmental ethics, then it is always helpful to look at the background situation of emerging this environmental ethics as a new discipline of moral philosophy. When we look at the background, then we find out that in 1963, there was a biologist called Rachel Carson. She wrote a book, Silent Spring, and in that book, she warned the world against the extensive use of pesticides such as DDT, aldrin, and dieldrin, and its harmful impact on food web. And you might be aware, and it is interesting to know that obviously now this DDT, aldrin, and dieldrin is no more used. In fact, it is banned to use it in the agriculture sector or some other form. So the point is that the Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring was considered to be the first book which dragged the attention of the intellectuals about the human wrongdoings, and in that way she just focused on the, you can say simply, the pesticides, the use of pesticides and its harmful impact. Secondly, when we look at that, then we have Stanford ecologist Paul Ehrlich's book, The Population Bomb. It came in 1968. In that book, Paul declared that the growth of human population damaging the ecology of the earth unprecedentedly. As the title itself says, that population bomb. So Paul basically dragged the attention to the just unprecedentedly increasing of the human population. The main argument of Paul was that if we do not stop, or human being doesn't control the population increase, then it might cause the great damage to the ecology of the earth. So in that way, population bomb also proved to be a very important milestone in the you can say just field of environmental ethics. Now, if the next comes basically when we look at all these two books or the many other books which just take care of the environmental issue, environmental degradation. So all of these books basically talked about the you can say the stage of damaging stage of environmental damages. Actually, it just focused on the concerned, related, and threat of the environmental situation. And the most important again work was done by few scientists, and they just have a thoroughly study about the certain trend, global trend, and they just have a study of all those 5 trends, and they publish their report, which is also known as Limits to Growth. This report came in 1972, and the 5 trends of global concern were accelerating industrialization, rapid population growth, widespread malnutrition, depletion of non-renewable resources, and a deteriorating environment. The message of this limit to growth was there is a limit to growth. Technological development and societal increase cannot continue forever. So all these 3 work in the field of environment give an idea to the intellectual that situation is bad. Ecology of the earth has been damaged like anything. And picking up from that scientist or environmentalist the issues, moral philosopher also started to deliberate on the philosophical underpinning which caused ecological crisis. Now, there was a change in the approach. While what we can notice through these three books, what we find that basically these three books, or the report, basically provide us the exact situation of the deteriorating environmental or the environmental, you can say ecology of the earth. But now philosophers' main point was that to know the cause, the philosophical underpinning which is caused ecological crisis. What are the causes? What are the underlying philosophical, you can say just underpinnings which caused ecological crisis? And meanwhile, by this process, moral philosopher began to analyze and redefine the existing relationship between human and non-human natural world on same line. So basically, we can just note moral philosopher got a sense that the problem of ecological crisis or the cause of ecological crisis is basically philosophical. What kind of philosophical cause? That it is because of the wrong understanding of human and the relationship between human and non-human. They find out that our fundamental understanding of relationship is wrong. That here they started to deliberate upon that what sort of metaphysical status nature has, what kind of metaphysical and moral status human have, what kind of relation they have basically. So their concern was different. The moral philosopher look at these ecological crisis or the problems from the philosophical point of view. So, and by this kind of deliberation or the analysis, the environmental ethics as a new subdiscipline of moral philosophy emerged in 1970s. So now, just if we try to understand that what is environmental ethics. So the application of moral consideration in the area of environmental issue is known as environmental ethics or ecological ethics. It can be the definition and intellectual define environmental ethics in terms of that. In environmental ethics, we apply the moral consideration, the application of the moral consideration on what? In the area of environmental issues. So, when we apply the principle or the moral principles on environmental issues, it is known as environmental ethics or ecological ethics. So, in that way, we can say environmental ethics is the branch of applied ethics that attempts to provide the moral grounds for the reservation and restoration of the environment. The main focus was that let us preserve nature, restore the environment. But how to do that? For that, we have to look at the cause. If cause is philosophical, then obviously solution also will come from the philosophy itself. If the cause of the problem is the wrong understanding of the relationship between human and non-human component of the nature, then obviously solution also will come out to deliberate upon this wrong understanding of the relationship, or you can say a relationship between human and nature. So in that way, environmental ethics basically on the first hand adopt a different approach towards the environment, and at the same time it also try to preserve and restore environment as well. So finally, if we look at that, the environmental ethics questions the rationality of supposed moral superiority of human beings on earth. As I just mentioned, environmental ethics or the ecological crisis is because of the wrong moral understanding of human and nature relationship. What we have earlier, this point obviously we will discuss in much more detail in our second lecture, in the second lecture for the same series. But now this environmental ethics, moral philosopher questions the rationality of supposed moral superiority of human beings on earth. They ask the question, what is the ground, what are the philosophical grounds to claim that human beings are superior to the rest of the nature. So it just raises a fundamental questions about the relationship between human and non-human component of nature. So meanwhile, environmental ethics attempt to know the metaphysical status of human and non-human components of environment. And obviously, if we talk about the role of both human and you can say, or the relationship between human and non-human, then it demands a, you can say, just a fresh understanding of metaphysical status of human and nature. So therefore, environmental ethics also try to understand metaphysical status of human and non-human components of the environment. Similarly, it also discusses the moral status of human beings as well as the non-human natural world. Just you relate this point to the earlier one, that on the one hand, environmental philosopher try to understand the metaphysical status of human and non-human. At the same time, based upon this metaphysics, they also try to deliberate upon the moral status of human being as well as, you can say, non-human natural world. It means what kind of moral status human have or what kind of moral status non-human natural world has. So therefore, it is the discussion about the environmental ethics is the discussion about the metaphysical status of human and non-human. On the other hand, it also deliberates upon the, you can say, moral status, which is based upon the metaphysical status of human as well as non-human. So finally, environmental ethics also explores the possibility of rational arguments for assigning intrinsic value to the non-human content of natural environment. So, with this point, as I told in the earlier point, that the environmental philosophy also discuss about the moral status of human being as well as the non-human natural world. In the same way, environmental ethics also explore the possibility of rational argument. Rational argument for what? Assigning intrinsic value to the non-human content of natural world. It means that there is something important about the value here. So therefore, it leads us to understand what do we mean by value, because we are considering the moral status of human beings that depend upon the assigned value. What sort of value we just give to the human beings and non-human natural world? Based upon that, there are certain values. In one hand, we just assign certain value to the human and the certain values to the non-human. What are those values? That is the very important point here. So therefore, let us understand what is the value first, then, and what are the types of values specifically with context to the environmental ethics. So value. What is value? If we talk about the ethics, value plays an essential role in ethics. Values are the celebrated, you can say, just it's a celebrated ideas about the what a human being should do and should not do. So in that way, values plays an essential role in ethics. Values are basic and fundamental beliefs of an individual that guide or motivate his or her attitudes or actions. So values are guiding force for the human beings. Similarly, we can say values provide the general guidelines for conduct as well. What kind of conduct we do, that depend upon our value system. Now, after discussing that the importance of the value, there are two types of values. One is known as extrinsic value and other is known as intrinsic value. And how they are important in the field of environmental ethics, we'll just see. Just extrinsic value, let's talk first about the extrinsic value. Extrinsic value is also known as instrumental value. And extrinsic value is one which is a means to some other higher end. Similarly, extrinsic value is always conditional. It means that if things have a value with certain condition, then it is known as extrinsic value. It fluctuates as per the desirability of end to which it is the means. Just for the illustration, look, we have the money. What is the value of the money? Value can just help us to buy many things. So the money have the value which is extrinsic. So money hold extrinsic value which allow us to serve our greater end or the purpose like happiness and health. Likewise, there is another way we can understand. Just when we look at the environment, the plants, then they provide us many types of food, furniture, clothing, medicine, and obviously in that way, when we look at the plants, in that sense that they provide human beings something valuable, so this way the plants also become valuable to the human beings. Again, here also the plants or the trees are valuable because they are provide fruits or some medicine to the human beings. So therefore, here again the trees or the nature have extrinsic value in that way. Now, intrinsic value. Intrinsic value is the value that an entity has in itself or for its own sake or in its own right. When a things have a value in itself, then it is known as that the things hold value which is intrinsic, and in that way, if things have intrinsic value, when a things doesn't have the value for the sake of something else, then that things has intrinsic value. Now, this intrinsic value again are two types. One, subjective intrinsic value, and the second it is objective intrinsic value. Now, subjective intrinsic values is that subjective intrinsic value is created by human valuing. It means again, this sort of intrinsic value is assigned by the human being itself. So, in a sense that it also has the conditionality which is imposed by the human being itself. So, in that way, this intrinsic value is actually subjective or it is assigned by the human being itself. So, in that way, an entity has intrinsic value if it is valued for what it is rather than for what it can bring about. It is not valuable in sense of something else, but it is value in itself. A thing has value in itself, like human beings. Human beings have value in itself. Like again, subjective intrinsic value is created by valuers, humans, through their evaluative attitude or judgments. Hence, like instrumental value, it is conditional and has no independent status. So, these are like other, you can say in a sense that in the subjective value, subjective intrinsic value is turned to be conditional. And finally, there is objective intrinsic value. Objective intrinsic value is not conferred by the humans. Objective value or objective intrinsic value has such inherent properties or features in virtue of which it is valuable. Therefore, it is an unconditional value. Finally, objective intrinsic value is independent of humans' attitude or judgment. So, in that way, we know that values play a very important role in the human, you can say, just environmental philosophical discussion. And without understanding the value or the division of value, it becomes very hard to understand what is environmental ethics is all about. So the rest or the rest of the things which we will discuss in the coming second lecture. Thank you.